Welcome back, and we're moving into our first conversation for today. As we approach December 10th, the commemoration of the Human Rights Declaration, we're having a conversation about human rights in Belize. And the entity that works to educate people about human rights is the Human Rights Commission of Belize. And we have Vice President Kevin Arthurs with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, guys.
Hey, it's always nice to see you. I must big up the yellow. You're there. You're there. You're there.
It's the color of hope.
That's right.
We like that.
Definitely. You know, it's nice to have you in. And of course, when it comes to the topic of human rights, it's something that's very dear to a lot of people. Many a times we don't even know that we've got rights. Where some folks might say, I'm not even thought that I've got rights, especially from brought up. See, this is one of the words that always stick with me. But tell us about the Human Rights Commission of Belize and some of the work that we do.
Well, I want to start off by saying that we are a very old organization, one of the oldest, in my opinion, in the country. We have been around since December 10th, 1987, wow. which is a milestone for us because we are not for-profit, non-governmental organization. Right. And I'm sure we've rubbed both government and business sector and other people wrong in many times. So to survive without being dependent on anyone is a feat within itself.
What's the origin of the organization?
There were labor issues down south, and some of our founding members took on the task of dealing with it. After that time, if you will recall, there was a time in our history where there were a lot of cases in relation to the death penalty. And so that's when we really, in my opinion, became very popular with some of the feats of Mr. Simeon Sampson, who is a stalwart, and some of the cases which are documented that he did in relation to the death penalty cases. So, and then we've progressed, as all organizations have, to what we are today.
Yeah. Now, it is always a great time to have a conversation about human rights. And I think one of the questions that we often discuss, or one of the areas that we often discuss, is looking at the general knowledge that people across the world and in Belize have about the recognition of rights and what it means. Let's talk about how what's your measuring stick for that?
Okay, that's a very good question, because this year, I started off by saying the organization is very old, but we recognize we have a very powerful group of people who are pulling a lot of load. One of the things we recognize is that the future of Belize and the future of human rights lies within our young people. So this year, as we celebrate two very important declarations, we decided to do a survey of young people. We did a survey consisting of young people between the ages of 10 and 20. And as you know, Marlene and John, that represents almost 60% of our population. Wow. So this is a very powerful stakeholding group. And a lot of times we overlook them. And so we thought it best at this point in time, when we as an organization are celebrating 30 years in existence, to go back and look at the young people. And I can tell you that the preliminary results of the survey are astonishing. One of the questions, to answer your question directly, that we put on the survey was asking the young people, who I would tell you the majority of them were between the ages of 13 and 16. We asked them, where did they get their information? And you would think that they would say
social media.
Social media.
Facebook.
Well, this is the value and the beauty of actually doing an empirical study. Because surprisingly, 41.2% of those polled said that they got their news from looking at Marlene in the evening at 6:30 on the evening news. And only 35% got their news from Facebook. Importantly and shockingly for me, because I am still young but on the brink.
Not 13 to 16.
No. But still, a whopping, to my mind, 12% of young people are getting their news from the radio. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So this allowed us to ask other questions, and we another interesting question that we asked was in relation to how aware they felt that they were on current issues. And you were asking me earlier about whether or not they are aware of their rights and the like. And in fact, according to young people, a very close margin, 52% of them said no, they're not really abreast of what's going on. Although a close 42% said yes, we are. So we use that backdrop to really ask them some pointed questions, and we promised them, and which we like. We're dealing with millennials, and millennials like to be part of a cause. If you look at some of the recent upheavals, even at, there was a young man who went missing for a while, and we had a huge issue at SJC, the young people just stood up. Yeah. They want to be part of a cause, and I think that Belize has a bright future. And before I go into, and when I will go into some of the astonishing results, but the last point of the survey was something that was very refreshing and reassuring, at least to me, no? So we asked them mundane some questions. For example, we asked them about the issue of whether or not they trusted the police. Now, youth by nature are anti-establishment. They have a tendency to not be...
They challenge authority.
They love to challenge authority. What is amazing, specifically in relation to the police, is that an overwhelming 81%, and we just had a news item, I believe, last night in relation to somebody who had died by the hands of the police. And the community, which is a rural community, standing up, and I heard there was burning of tires and that thing. So, 81% of young people said, we do not trust the police. Now, these figures, as astonishing as they are not something that we go back to young people and chastise them about. It's an opportunity for introspection. What are we doing wrong? What can we do to change this view? And so I'm sure the Commissioner of Police looking on this morning.
Let me jump in here with what the critics will say about the data you present, first of all. Your sample size and the reach.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the end of the study, we will be looking at about 400.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, the survey is not designed to be any basis for any major project. It is simply a feeler. Yeah. When was the last time we had a survey from young people that you know about?
Sometimes there are things ongoing in the background that we aren't cognizant of, but, and I appreciate the data that you're sharing this morning, because more than, it's not evidence-based, they're not giving you proof as to why they don't trust the police, but it's a perception.
Correct.
And perceptions, despite what anybody says, are important because they guide what we believe, what we don't believe, what actions we take, what actions we won't take. So if 81% of 400 young people are saying, we don't really feel that trust, then it does show a weakness that has to be addressed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can also say in support of the study is that we intend to continue the samples, to increase the sample size.
Okay.
So intention is not to stop. We intend to have an ongoing project in terms of expanding.
It was a paper survey?
It was a paper survey.
Okay, so you'll still have that data available
We'll
after.
still have it available afterwards.
You know, and I wanted to know, because it's very important for folks to know, again, that they've got rights. But some of the questions asked, I would think, would be, where do I use my right? At what point do I use my right? And is there a boundary to using rights? And this is very important because a lot of us don't know that we've got this, and then we don't know how to reach it or when to use it.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful point, and as we do more surveys, I think that's one of the questions that we'll ask. One of the interesting questions that were asked in this survey, because it was a very small, the number of questions were very small. We intended it that way because young people, their attention span isn't one that, and we wanted focused, concentrated, and interesting responses from them. I know Marlene will like this question, which was in relation to whether or not the young people felt that there was gender equality in Belize, that the women were treated equally as men.
Yeah.
Well, you would think the numbers are surely.
I don't know what to think the answer will be. So please, I'm on the edge of my seat, figuratively, not literally. Yeah.
Well, these young people said that they do not believe that women and men are treated equally in Belize, that women are in fact treated at a disadvantage. And that is by a 65% margin.
Overwhelming.
Oh, that's overwhelming, definitive. That's one of the things I found about this survey. The responses were definitive. Even except for the being aware of certain things, the responses were binary.
Yeah.
They were either yes or no.
No,
Yeah. And the gender breakdown for the survey? How many boys, how many girls?
It was about equal.
Yeah.
It was 51% female.
Okay.
Okay.
The majority female,
So
which is
almost
about
half, yeah.
reflective of what is in the
Yeah.
in primary school.
Well, the next
What
shocking
is the
in
most
schools.
surprising data? And we have to say, a part of the reason we really can't show you this is the results were compiled. You received the final results last night.
We received the preliminary results last
Preliminary
night.
results,
Yeah.
yeah. So what is the most surprising bit of information, other than those mentioned, that has been produced by the survey?
Well, in my opinion, one of the most surprising to me was in relation to the issue of the how maybe I shouldn't go that way because it was all very interesting, and
I'm sure it's all interesting, but there has to be one that you stop. It happens to all of us, and you say, "Wow."
yeah, for me, there's always an overlap,
Yeah.
and December 9th is celebrated internationally as Anti-Corruption Day. And interestingly enough, one of the questions was about how they felt whether or not the country was corrupt or not.
Okay.
The most surprising thing to me was that, would you believe that 89%, almost 90% of young people between the ages of 10 and 20 felt that we were a corrupt country?
That's not that surprising to me.
It is because
It's concerning.
It's concerning, yes.
It's extremely concerning. But I think given the context of what the conversations have been, it, like I said, isn't that surprising? The number is concerning.
I thought the gap, I thought it would be a little bit less. When we get older, we tend to be colored and biased by our political moorings or job. We get sheltered by our economic positions. Children and youths don't have those blinders on. And that's where we lap back to the issue of where they're getting the information from.
Yeah.
Because it's a perception. How do I feel about it? And that, it was a wide question. So it includes their schools, includes
Yeah.
the government, includes the police, includes every single layer of their lives.
Let me add to that a little bit more, and I keep on citing this example because I don't think it's something we should let go of. We interviewed student government leaders several weeks ago, and there was one particular school, one president, who said that her campaign, one of the promises was to change the name student government to student union, because at tertiary level, the students wanted nothing to do with something labeled government, and they could rally more people behind them, calling it a student union, and they won. So that's why I'm saying, having had many conversations with young people on this show, this perception isn't that surprising, but it should be an alarm going off for all of us in this
I
country.
love millennials.
Yeah.
You know, and just to throw in on that, last week with having conversation with some of the folks who were actually vying in the football area, didn't even want to say manifesto.
Yeah.
Because of the same situation. Now, I would think that the numbers for that would have been much more higher, because the conversation today, and reason
Wow,
being,
John, you're a
reason
nominal
being-
optimist.
Reason being is because the
Surprise.
conversation today is actually about how corrupt this government is or that government is.
Comparatively.
The conversation today in a household, because it comes more as a propaganda. This is when people actually have a conversation. And do we remove the young people from around us? No, we're not even seeing that. Reason being is because the propaganda is what you call juicy. so this is the reason why I would say, you know what, this number would be much more higher, because everybody is hearing that the government is corrupt, whether be it this color, whether be it that color. That's the conversation. So I would think that would have been higher.
Well, 91 is fairly significant. But my question has to do, we're talking human rights. And it is important for us to put this in context with what this has to do with our individual human rights or collective human rights.
Well, human rights don't move themselves. And human rights are things which, even though, as John was asking about what they are, one of the favorite questions I ask people when I do presentations, and I love to do it to high schools and sixth form, is how do you define human rights? And most people before they do. The whole issue of human rights is something that we have to continually be behind, chasing and redefining. Yeah. One of the new areas of human rights is the issue of digital privacy. Because where these people are living now, you can be friends with somebody on Facebook and they see you on the street and they don't call to you. But that creates an entire world. It's not the world of Mr. Sampson or the world of, not even my world. It's the world of Instagram and Facebook. And so as we monitor what human rights are, because we don't have, I would say in Belize, we have certain human rights issues, but we don't have others. Yeah. We don't have female mutilation, we don't have, we don't
have war issues.
We don't have war issues and the like. So our challenges in Belize are a bit different, but we have to define those rights in a way that is reflective of what's happening internationally.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because where oftentimes, if we look at what happens in other parts of the world where there are severe human rights violations, one would look at Belize and say, oh, you guys are okay.
We're good.
But we have had quite a number of issues that at times pop up on the forefront and then continue to linger in the background. The death penalty has been one from a long time ago. We talk about lack of justice when people don't have access to the courts in a timely manner. Corporal punishment, the very controversial issue, which really boils down to children's rights that are essentially human rights. I think those are three that I can think of. And of course, the issues when it comes to the LGBT community. When we talk about human rights, their rights are based within the foundation of the Human Rights Declaration. As people, the essence of having human rights is being born human and not a monkey or a rat, you know? That's what distinguishes whether or not you have these rights, nothing else.
And we did include a question about the LGBT community and whether or not persons from the LGBT community were in fact being treated equally. And again, the numbers are definitive. There's no confusion with these millennials. They felt that 76% of persons from the LGBT community were not being treated equally. For them, it's not an issue. They're clear cut. One of the things I wanted to address here as well, though, was the whole issue of, you spoke about the fairness of the justice system, and again, young people felt that our justice system was unfair by, again, a 75.4% margin. So these numbers are completely overwhelming and astonishing. What is interesting for me, though, and what brings the silver lining to all of this data, is that, as I was saying, human rights have to be moved by persons. They don't exist in abstraction. Just like you have the police who do enforcement and are the face of it. People are the agents of change. And young people, despite all the overwhelming data, not feeling that our country was above reproof, that we had a corrupt country, not feeling as though there was equality between men and women, not feeling that the LGBT community was being treated fairly, not feeling as though that the police were people to trust. They still believed strongly, I would say, by a margin of 63% to 33%, that they could actually effect change.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
That is inspiring.
So, we give our young people a bad rap sometimes, and I think there are many young people in this country who are doing amazing things and kind of chiseling away in their own little corner. But my question has to do with whether or not there's anything in the survey to help us understand the inaction. You cited the Kelvin Usher case, which was, I think, one of the times that people started to say, wow, you know, the young people are standing up. And the reason we as the older population, we are so inspired by this is because we know history has proven that usually when there is an effective change in a culture, especially against bad practices in a country, it's led by the young people, you know. We have from the most recent examples, we see what's happening in Honduras right now. You go back to the Arab Spring. These are all, they were university students. Some of them had started over Twitter and Facebook, silent protests. But we haven't seen it in Belize in speaking out on any particular issue. So is there anything in the survey that indicates why they have these beliefs that there are these negative issues, they have their hopefulness that they can affect the change, but there isn't the translation of knowledge into action?
There's no direct question on that, but what we have is we have two pieces of data to me which tell a clear picture. They're seeing all these problems. They believe that the system itself is bad. But they believe that they can change it. So in my opinion, what they're saying is that we're disengaged from the system.
Yeah.
We don't want to be a part of that because, as you were saying, you know, it comes with all this negativity. But we can change it if we are given the opportunity to.
Yeah.
So the opportunity there is to find a way to get them involved. And I think that they are poised to do it. What is happening right now is that, in my opinion, there's a leadership void. Young people do not have persons who they can look up to and definitively say, you know, that person is on a good cause. When a person talk, I go out, they go, lock off the bridge. But young people are also operating. I think the leaders the older people aren't following the younger people. You have to find them where they are. They're on Facebook, they're on social media. And I don't think that there is any sustained campaign to engage people. And that's one of the things we're doing at the Commission. We're trying to reach the young people where they are.
Yeah.
Because if you look at individually, if we did the same survey by looking at young people's pages between the ages of 10 and 20, every day you would see them complaining about something on the news, complaining about. So they are engaged and seeing the issues. But there's just no forum to collate their forces and direct it to change.
And even speaking their language, I think that is where
absolutely.
we all miss the mark sometimes, because and it's translating into us as adults now. How many of us can tune into a video online for more than a minute? And for young people, it's even less.
Yeah,
that's true.
How many of us can read a paragraph online if you don't get through the first two sentences and move on? And this is where their attention span is, and this is how much opportunity you have to really tap into their thoughts or to educate in any way, shape, or form. So you spoke about reaching them on social media, but how do you simplify the message of human rights to Belizean youths in, what is it, Twitter is now 200 and something characters, and videos are online for sometimes 6 to 10 seconds.
You've been reading my mind. I call it the Twitter attention span.
Yeah.
We live in a meme society. These young people, they get all their information and all their messaging from this new thing called memes, which is just a picture with maybe about 10 characters.
And that's it, yeah.
And a photo, yeah.
And a photo. And what it is, psychologically, it is intolerance for excess and nonsense. They want it condensed and directed.
Direct.
All right? So for us, our challenge is to actually start with things like this. When these surveys were being done, you should have seen the excitement on these young people's faces. Like, you want to hear from me? Like, seriously? Wow. I'll tell you. I hope you can handle it.
They're waiting to be
I'm
engaged.
They're
very sure they
waiting
said
to
those
be
exact words
engaged.
to you. Yeah.
And I think not only the Human Rights Commission of Belize, but also other agencies. We have the Youth Department, we have the Teaching Commission. All agents have to rethink the language because we're not talking their language. We're not talking their language. I remember sitting around in a group in trying to decide how we would get the attention of these young people, and some very elaborate documents being prepared. And my thing was,
Yeah, let's do a 40-minute documentary.
yeah, let's do a 40-minute documentary. And my answer to the persons was that if we do one meme, we will have it go viral, promote it on Facebook, and
Reach more people.
we'll have more impact on these young people. I think we've been talking above their heads because we dismiss them.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the issue of young people and not having that leadership quality actually to look on. Speaking with young people, because I have a lot of young friends, and you know for a fact that they want to be engaged and they actually want to be something. But their thing now is to say, even if I should speak out and I would come out and say, you know what, I want to lead this group and I want to do it for years to come. And the moment they open their mouths and they've got that educated mind, you could hear it in the lingua, then the thing about them would, they would say, you know what, I can't do it because if I do, one of the parties will eventually try to engage me and then I might separate, or they want to separate. Why do you think this is? Why would this be the mindset of a young one?
I think it's part of where they're getting information from and the influences that are on them.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to look at everything, even the media, in terms of how are we educating our young people. If the only thing that our young people are looking at is the evening news, or evening news is not the most optimistic. We start off with murders, and then we go down to, whatever is happening in the political scene, and it's never, ever anything positive to my mind, whether it's a commission or land issues or passport issues, and they're looking at it and they're fatigued. I already don't have any time for this, and on top of that, everything you're telling me is bad. And I heard from the red, the blue, the yellow, the orange, it's the same thing.
It's the same cry.
Young people don't want to be bored, they want to be inspired. And we have to listen to them, which one of the questions we did ask in the survey was a very interesting one, which was the issue of whether or not Belize should go to the ICJ. Remember, at least 15% of the persons polled were between the ages of above voting age. And if the young people were to decide if we go to the ICJ, according to our survey, they wouldn't go by a margin of 64.8% to 30.7%, with 4.5% abstaining. So we can't overlook these people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't.
It reminds me so much of Brexit and the difference between the votes of the older population and the younger population, and where there is a huge disconnect in the information and how it is digested. But I want to bring it back to something that you said that is so important, and it is, in fact, we're seeing all the studies come out, we're seeing all the data come out, that the mindset of the millennials or the younger generations, I can't remember the specific age range, is that they're driven by different things and different causes. They're not looking for monetary success. They want the lifestyle, but they're driven by purpose, and they're driven by vision, and they will follow causes. And that is such a substantial issue that we don't pay attention to as much. I think in some of the work that we do here in Belize, people want to feel connection, amazingly so, and they spend so much time online. They want to feel like I am fighting for a purpose. So again, I go back to my fundamental issue. We don't talk about human rights. We don't I think, always make the connections between how human rights is an integral part of our everyday life in terms of the liberties we do have and the challenges that we do face. So how do you take the data, and I know it's very fresh, but if you were to kind of look at it right now and say where some of the ins are in being able to bring that connection between understanding human rights, fighting for human rights, with our young population today?
Well, I think you hit me on the head, which is that we have to know what is the what is the language of young people, and it is causes. You were speaking earlier as well about some of the human rights issues that we have been facing in Belize and what we don't face. A couple of the things that we have faced include trafficking in persons, but more specifically include extrajudicial killings. And that brings us back full circle to the Kelvin case. We have to show a connect, and that connect, for the most part, because the digital is contradictory. You are everywhere and you're nowhere. You're friends with people and you're not friends with them. You're connected but you're not connected. And one of the things about human rights causes is that, for the most part, we do not, even people who are not millennials, people who are not young people, we do not pay attention to it until it happens to us. So I can never forget the recent issue where we had the Crime Control Council issue crime designated areas, and there was this whole focus on quality of life crimes, and there was that being drummed, and people were being, I remember going to court one morning and the courtroom packed, and I was like, oh my gosh, was there a protest and we've charged all these people? And all of them were there for bell and light, and the magistrate couldn't perform her duties. And I could never forget the young people who were there, you know, just saying, man, I mean, I can't believe if this is what you're here for, and then there are murderers out there. Yeah. So our job is really to bring it home to them, and not bring it home to them at a point in time where it is affecting them, but more so to get them, I'll say this, for however controversial it is, Facebook and social media makes us selfish. When you wake up in the morning and see how are you feeling, you put up selfies of you put up selfies. It's all about you. And the thing about human rights is that it is about everybody else. It's about somebody who cannot help themselves.
Yeah.
It's about everybody else apart from you and your connection to humanity and the basic minimum of what makes them human.
But let's not forget successful campaigns. I'll give you the classic example. Time Person of the Year, the Silence Breakers. The beginning of the cause, Me Too, where it's selfish. I share Me Too, hashtag Me Too, because I have suffered sexual harassment or assault in the workplace or in my life. So I post about me, but I cause everybody else to take action as well and paint a picture as to how serious this problem is. Now, there are critics to this movement, but
I love it.
I believe it shows, one, that you can. I saw many Belizeans posting Me Too, and this was a US-based initiative.
Yes.
We saw celebrities from all parts of the world posting Me Too. And what it shows is, yes, I'll be talking about me, but I'm with other people.
And that is the classic example of how to use the fact of where young people are to get a message out. We know that there is a selfishness to it, so let's use that selfishness to create a movement.
Yeah.
In Belize, I don't think there's a lot of marketing and science that went behind that. I don't think in Belize we are even aware that there's a different language, more so to use that language. So that is where we should go, using where the young people are, and actually using the downfalls to build on.
Yeah. So, let me get to one of the important questions here. Why should we care about human rights? Why do we need to know or understand?
Human rights are a marker. It's to me almost like your poverty index rate. You know, you want it to be, human rights to be so healthy that you don't even think about it. But you also want to have a consciousness in your mind to know when you are falling off, when you are less human than you should be, when you're treating someone less human than they should be treated. And so human rights are you know what they are. Nobody has to tell you that you have a right to life. Nobody has to tell you a right to have your dignity, to not be bullied, to not be discriminated against. And so human rights are a way for us. I always tell people that human rights has a Christian base, an absolute Christian base. And when I say that, people are like, oh man,
Why?
Yeah.
certain issues that you guys take up that I don't think are too Christian.
But it's a golden rule.
It's the golden rule. It's about love and equality. And I remember while preparing, we were doing emails back and forth throughout the commission. And there was another group who had made a presentation at the church. And I was telling the other member that we really should go into the church and speak to them. Because I had an experience once where we were doing fundraising. No, we do all sorts of work. I think at the time what we were doing, we were dealing with the issue of, and we are very proud of some of the accomplishments that we've made over the year, which include the guidelines for treatment of persons in detention, which is a huge document. We are also proud of dealing with having our input in the new criminal procedure rules. But while we were dealing with the issue of, because we found out that there's a mechanism in the prison. Who cares about prisoners? A news tells us that they're bad, they're shooting people every day, our crime rate was so high, who cares about them? Well, we have to juxtapose two statistics together. One is what we see on the news. We also look at the conviction rate, which the perception is that it's about 3 or 4%. So there must be a lot of innocent people in jail.
Yeah.
And we were doing a project, and we found out that there's a mechanism called a visiting justice. What is a visiting justice? A visiting justice is a justice of peace who goes to the prison and hears complaints of prisoners. So if they're being treated, if they're being put in a hole, and we've heard about a situation happening in the prison right now we intend to address. But
We
you
have
don't
an
want
alleged rape claim right now.
quite a few. But even though it's in the law, in the Prison Act, it is not, there has not been a visiting justice in years. So who do you complain to as a prisoner? Let's say you're innocent behind there. You're in the yard, Marlene, you come to see one of your friends, and John, in that yard, they have a bullet. Or you go to jail because that's the law.
That's the law,
and you're
yeah.
behind there. And you get treated badly, you raped, you're a prison guard that you had in primary school, that you rubbed the wrong way, decides that he's going to put you in the hole. Who do you complain to?
Yeah.
Who's the independent person that you complain to? And that was the purpose of visiting justice. But while doing that project, which is a project about JPs, we started to raise funds. We're non-for-profit. We're not dependent on any big funder. And I remember we spoke to a certain community, and we were asking them for support. We were doing a play. And I can never forget that the community, that particular community, was very religious and does a lot of our industrial work out west. They said they could not be a part of the commission. And I remember speaking, the person I was speaking to was a friend of mine, a leader in that community. And I told him, like, yo, dude, this is human rights. I mean, part of what you guys do, you feed us, and, you know, you guys came here, your community came here fleeing from certain things. And that person said, you know, we just can't be a part of it. And I said, really what you're doing here is you're discriminating against persons who are fighting for the rights of other people. And he laughed. And he himself helped, but the community refused to. I say that because we have to recognize that discrimination happens to all of us. It's not something that we are immune from. If you're a woman, you're discriminated against. If we're Garifuna, we're discriminated against. If we're male, we're discriminated against. And we have to recognize where that discrimination is and try to eradicate. And that's simply what human rights advocacy is about. It's about leveling the playing field. I'll give you one final joke in relation to that. I was driving on my way to work, and there was this horrible driver who took a U-turn at a place that ought not to have been taken, and was very bold in doing it. When I looked into the car, the person was female. And I thought to myself, there's a lot of complaint that there is a gender bias and that women are treated fairly. But when it comes to driving, women have a complex, that they are an entitlement complex that I would get away with. If I bump your bumper, I'll come out, I'll bat my eyelashes, and I'll say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, and I'll move on. That is what I call reverse discrimination.
We'll have that conversation.
Yes.
So we'll scratch that one from the record for now.
I wanted to shed light quickly on something that sitting down here, I think it was last week with Anne Marie and them, and Marlene brought up a point that still bothers me up to today, and it boils down to the fact that the rights that parents are actually showing that their child should have, or if they're even showing the right that your an uncle or a friend came in, your child is about 2, 3, 4, 5. That child is totally innocent, and that child just don't want to go to this individual. But the parent forced the child to go to that individual, forgetting that that child has a right not to. Are we instilling this into parents? Because they should know. And this thing bothered me to no more.
I hope you stop forcing your
seriously.
daughter now to do it.
I never
How
did
so,
because
yeah.
I know how important it is. But
Yeah.
she really shed that light, and it is very important. Parents are not to force their child to do anything they don't want to. We shed light on this.
You know, actually, John, I was having a converse experience. I was looking at a family member, a niece of mine, who was refusing to do a particular thing. And when her mother came to her and says, let's go, I told you to do it. And she said, no, I have a right not to.
Wow.
And I looked at this 6-year-old and I thought, where did you get that from? So I waited until after the steam blew off. And I pulled the child on the side and I said, where did you get that from? I said, listen, uncle, say we have rights, and they taught us in schools. So the schools are doing a tremendous job in telling these young people that you can't knock me and you can't do me certain things, because that's child abuse. And I have the ability and the right to call in institutions.
And
So it's a thin line.
And the key point, and having done children's rights education, the key point is always to teach rights coupled with responsibilities.
Absolutely.
So while I have a right of freedom
Absolutely.
of speech, I don't have a right to speak in a way that will defame another person,
Absolutely.
because that's infringing on their rights. And so I think it is always important to be able to speak of them both when you speak about rights. And it does start with children. But Kevin, I think this has been such a great conversation.
Yeah.
We're out of time. When will you be publishing the results? Where can people see the survey?
I think that we're going to have periodic releases.
Okay.
For sure, by the 10th of December, which is a celebration of Human Rights Day, I'm sure we'll have it published. We have a website, HRCB BZE. Type it in and we're there. We have a website as well.
A Facebook page.
Facebook page, sorry. And we'll be publishing it online. We'll also be doing a press release shortly, which we hope to include some of the data in here, the preliminary results. And when I say preliminary constantly, is because we intend to have an ongoing survey. We want to get the number up to a substantial figure.
Yeah. Okay.
right.
Well, thank you for coming in and sharing that preliminary data.
Thank you for having me.
Happy anniversary to you and the rest of the members of the HRCB.
We're all members.
We are all members. And I think what's most important is that people can tap into the resources you have available to educate themselves. And we wish you the best of luck as well.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back in a few. Stay tuned.